Welcome to the Brass and Woodwind shop. There are 3 different types of pivot screws that hold keys onto woodwind instruments. Here are the 3 different types of pivot screws. This video is going to be about this type of pivot screw with no shoulder on the head and a pointed end. Since these screws do not have heads on them, you can screw these screws in and out of the post, and what that does is it controls how tight or how loose the key is. So every time you take one of those screws out and put it back in, you control how tight the key is. Here's a drawing of what these pivot screws look like, and if there's a gap between the pivot screw and the key, then the key is going to wobble. So what you'd do is you'd screw the pivot screws in tighter. That will close up the gap so that the key will be tighter. If you screw in these screws too far though, it's going to make the key too tight and then it will get stuck. I'm going to install a key to show you what I'm talking about. You put the key between the 2 posts, then you screw in the screw, and I'm holding the key and I'm kind of pushing it toward the post. And what I am feeling for is when the screw starts to push on the key. So I'm screwing that in. I'm also looking right here in between the post and the key. And as soon as I see a little gap start to develop, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to make sure that there's a little bit of room here for the other screw to do its job. And then I'm going to turn it around, put in the other screw. I'm screwing in the other screw, and what I'm feeling for is when the key starts to bind up a little bit. If the spring is not attached, the key should move freely, but then as soon as it stops moving freely, then you know that the screw is a little bit too tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that back until the key can move freely. Then you feel the key, and there should be just a tiny bit of movement, not a lot, just a tiny little bit, so that you can feel it but not see it. So if you can just feel a tiny little bit of movement, but you cannot see it move, and the key goes up and down without any problem, then you know that the screws are screwed in the right amount. And then after that, you can hook up the spring. You can also do this job with the spring on it, but remember that if you do, then the spring is going to pull the key up, and the screws may be too tight, but the key will still work because the spring is pulling it up. But once you start to play it, it may start to get stuck. So you want to make sure it is not too tight, even with the spring on it. And the way you do that is by feeling the key. Again, if it moves a tiny little bit and you can feel it, but you cannot see it, then that is the right amount, and you know it's good even with the spring on it. Sometimes these screws can get loose, and they can work themselves out just by playing the instrument, and there are a few different ways you can deal with that problem. You can either replace the screw, or you can pull the screw out a little bit and take a pliers, a round nose pliers. It has smooth jaws, and you can squeeze the screw just a little bit, and that can cause the screw to become a little tighter. I will say if you do that, it will affect the screw a little bit, but it's better than having the screw come out. You can also put some Loctite on the screw, which is a plastic-like substance that hardens on the screw and it keeps the screw from going in and out. I hope this video has been helpful. Look in the description below for links to the other videos on the other types of pivot screws, and please subscribe for more band instrument repair videos.